try to get on the agenda. So thank you so much for being here and welcome to this afternoon's candidate forum hosted by the Columbia Chamber of Commerce. I am Heather Hargrove with Stony Creek Hotel and Conference Center, and I am currently co-chairing Government Affairs along with Joe Henderson with Central Bank of Boone County.
How many people knew that Heather was with Stony Creek Conference Center? Okay.
I thought she was with you.
Cool. All right.
I thought I'd just go ahead and throw that in there today. So it is official as of today.
I think it's more unique that Fred was actually listening.
Oh, Fred hangs on my every word.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm scared to death of her.
So as always, and we have been doing at the Chamber, we are recording today's forum and we'll be uploading that to the Chamber's website. Also to let you know, when it's being live streamed, you can go on the Chamber website page and see that, but after the event is over and it's recorded, it will be uploaded. And if you go to the Resources tab, that's where you'll be able to find the interviews and the forums, including this one plus the ones that we have done in the past. So just to let you know, you can look that information up. So we're here today for a couple of things. One is to learn more about the candidates that are vying for the 50th District State Representative seat, as well as to listen to a presentation regarding Proposition 1, which is the renewal of the county's 0.5% sales tax for roads and bridges. So today we're going to start in regards to Proposition 1, and we would like to welcome our presenters for that, former Governor Roger Wilson and Boone County Commissioner Fred Perry. So please welcome, and gentlemen, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here today. We appreciate you all turning out and for your interest in not only the 50th district race, but also in the road and bridge tax. And I thought before we begin, I would recognize and introduce our County Treasurer, Tom Darrow, in the back of the room. That's very good. And of course, Representative Chuck Bates. You couldn't remember his name there for a second, but thank you all for being here. And Cherie Reich, 44th District. Very good. Thank you, Cherie. The County Commission first went to the voters about a road and bridge tax in 1993, 25 years ago. And they introduced a 0.5 cent sales tax to improve county roads, bridges, right-of-ways. And the voters have resoundingly approved this tax over the last 3 periods. The first tax was for 5 years, the second tax was for 10 years, and the third version of it was for also 10 years. And so for 25 years we've had this tax. At the time this tax was introduced, the county also decided to roll back property taxes. So they went from 29 cents per $100 of assessed valuation down to 5 cents. And so there was a pretty dramatic decrease, in almost an 80% decrease in what the county collects in terms of property tax for roads and bridges. So there was a significant rollback, which doesn't get mentioned very often, but I wanted to bring that up today. So I will tell you that I have spent much of the last 25 years being a critic of county government, and I tell you that now that I'm in-house and part of the problem, I am pretty impressed by the way that our resource management department and our public works department, the job that they do in taking care of our county roads and bridges. There is a lot of technology. I'm proud to tell you that your Boone County Public Works Department it really uses the most state-of-the-art technology in determining how they improve roads, the way that they improve roads, and which roads get taken care of first in terms of the priority. Okay, they have a very significant, impressive formula that they use. And so I have been impressed by that. And of course, they work closely with our resource management department as we plan the county's growth. And I will tell you, this tax generates about $14 million a year. Unfortunately, it is just enough money to maintain our county roads and bridges. We do not have significant enough resources to build new roads, and so most of this money goes towards simply the maintaining of roads. And I'm going to turn it over to Governor Wilson and let him talk a little bit about some of the things that he has learned as the chair of our campaign.
Thank you, Fred. Good job. Well, if you're going to introduce some people, I'm going to introduce
Okay, all right.
I'd like to recognize Rudy Keller from the Tribune, Tom Mendenhall, one of the oldest landowners in Boone County. And speaking of landowners, I'm assuming quite a few of you are landowners. And if you take a look at the 771 miles that Boone County has to say grace over, and take a look at what even the 29-cent levy would amount to right now, we would be woefully underfunded, and your property tax would either have to go up, or some of the chip and seal would just revert to gravel, and we would take a step backwards. That would be inappropriate and unconscionable for Boone County. Boone County has become a hub, a central region hub, whether it's tourism, medicine, the insurance companies we have here. Coming right up is the eclipse. There'll be about 100,000 visitors to Boone County. The road system that we have, if it were funded by property tax, would not be in the condition it's in right now. So 25 years ago, people made a good decision, and the voters, by I think it was 75 or 85%, approved this. There's some self-interest getting that property tax down, especially if you're a large property owner. But seeing the future and how much we are going to need to have an excellent transportation system was something that everybody agreed with. And I hope that voters agree with it again. I'd like to ask the chamber for its endorsement of Prop 1. We want to thank the district, which we received an endorsement from today. I'm sure somebody will think of some reason to oppose it, but when they do, I want you to think, do I really want to take a step back for my community? Do I really want to have a deteriorating road system? That's unacceptable. We're moving forward. As Fred said, it can take care of the repair and maintenance right now. But if you blow a bridge out, it could be $500,000. And some of the weather we've had has blown a few bridges and culverts out. It's important to keep what we have and try to progress as much as we possibly can. This plan allows us to do it. It is not a new tax. It is a renewal of the half-cent sales tax that voters approved 25 years ago. I think it's time to keep going. Fred and I have 20 minutes. I don't think we've used half of it. You pay our salaries. You used to pay my salary, you now pay Fred's salary. You're entitled to any question you want to ask within the bounds of reasonableness and decency.
It might be hard. You know, I want to add one thing. On a local level, part of this $14 million that we collect, there's a very complicated formula that was agreed upon by all the participating municipalities and communities in Boone County back in 2011 about how the roads money is distributed. So we'll take a chunk of this money we collect and give it to the city of Columbia. We'll take a chunk of it and give it to Ashland. We'll take a chunk and give it to Centralia. One of the things that I think Columbia gets about $2 million a year out of this, and that money was used by the city of Columbia to improve Scott Boulevard. And so they took matching funds from MoDOT, they took money from the county that we gave them every year for the roads to complete that. That was a big project when really MoDOT didn't have a lot of money. And Scott Boulevard was a very important corridor in our community. And if you've been down it lately, you know, and I know there was a lot of pain during the construction period, but it is dramatically improved, and it's improved access for everybody living in Southwest Columbia. So,
and when that revenue sharing agreement was created, every community signed on. It was unanimous. And so I think you don't usually see that, right? but it was very welcome, obviously very well thought out, and it has been well executed.
Sherry, I'm sure we can.
Oh. I had more of a statement than a question. I just want to thank the county commission for making this tax have a 10-year sunset on it instead of a permanent tax. I think the voters are more willing to approve this, and I come on board and I'm supporting this because I was there back in the early 90s when the first 5-year and subsequent ones. But that way there's accountability in government, and we don't know what sales tax is going to be doing 10 or 20 or 50 years from now. So I want to thank you all for giving it a sunset and come back to us in 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. Caleb, do you have a question?
You came back and
Oh,
answered, but
okay.
I wanted to make sure that everybody here that was from those local municipalities knew that extra benefit, that it's not just the county roads that get that money, but it's our local communities as well. So I just wanted to
All right,
make
good.
sure you mentioned that.
Tom?
So Cherie's comment was a perfect lead-in to what I was going to ask. As you debated that 10 years versus perpetuity, which is, because I'm pretty sure we're going to have roads and bridges forever,
Yeah.
and I was a part of a couple of those conversations. Can you talk a little bit about what made the decision? It may be as simple as what Cherie just said, maybe people would support.
Well, we really, we were relying on information, feedback that we were getting from the county clerk and from other folks about the necessity of going to the voters, you know, because of the cost of election. And, you know, elections are very expensive in Boone County. And so we had a pretty high confidence level that this would pass because the last one passed with a pretty significant, the last two have passed with significant majorities. If you recall, just to add a little Boone County history here, the very first time that this passed, it barely passed because that was the only time that Boone County used mail-in ballots. And that was very controversial, and I think it stimulated a few lawsuits. The city suing the county instead of the county suing the city. And so it was, but, you know, it was, but that was very controversial. I know, sorry. So to answer your question, Tom, I think that it really boiled down to accountability. We felt very confident that the county had been good stewards of road and bridge money over the years, and so it was going to be a pitch that was easy to make, and we didn't want to complicate things by making it permanent.
It gives you another chance to do community think in 10 years.
Right.
You're right, we don't know what's gonna happen with sales tax, but somebody may be out there that can build a better mousetrap. That gives you the avenue or the time certain when you know you're gonna re-examine it. It's good public policy.
Is there room in the budget for major expenditures that would attract a new business, prepare a property for doing business, or to support major construction of new subdivisions where people will expect a paved road to get to their new subdivision? Or are we just going to maintain the roads with the money we're getting out of this tax?
Well, I would tell you that there's really not room in the budget to do much of anything major, but we do have some flexibility. For example, right now, we have a major employer that's coming out on Route Z. And we were able to move believe it or not, St. Charles Road is going to be a fairly important artery to get to this new employer for a lot of its employees. And so we were able to move St. Charles Road up on the list when we found out this employer was coming. And then we were able to use some existing resources to leverage community development block grant money from the federal government to pay for improvements on Route Z. But really, to answer your question directly, no, there really isn't money for major road projects. You know, there's a lot of people looking at Gans Road right now in southern Boone County as a possible opportunity to have a southern loop through Columbia and connect it to I-70. That is something that's been on the books for a long time in Columbia. We need about an $8 million bridge and some more money to improve, to connect basically folks off of South Columbia all the way over to I-70 through Discovery Ridge. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to move funds around if we need to provide matching dollars. I'm hoping that the road tax gives us that opportunity to do so. If it doesn't pass, we won't have that option. Okay.
And kind of along those lines, where we're looking at the lack of funds for big projects, you know, with MoDOT struggling with funding as it is, I know we had been on the list for a long time for reinvestment at the Interstate 70, 63 PP interchange. I mean, that's a failed intersection, it's just terrible. But is there any plans looking forward to try to figure out a way to fund that on our own, since it doesn't look like the state's gonna have the money to do it anytime soon?
Well, we believe that if we can do the Gans Road project in the future, that will take a lot of pressure off that connector. Also, the extension of Clark Lane, which is part of the project that's being done at Route Z for American Outdoor Brands. We think that if we can put together a plan for Clark Lane, that's going to take some pressure off of that intersection as well. And then, you know, just opening Discovery Ridge, which the city is doing right now, opening Discovery Ridge from that interchange of Gans Road and 63 up through Rolling Hills Road, up Grace Lane, maybe diverting it around Grace Lane. But that's also going to take a lot of pressure off of the connector, which I agree with you, and I think that most people involved in the project 15, 20 years later are saying, yeah, that didn't work.
They are putting in an extension of the business loop that's going to exclude the on-ramp to I-70 right there near 63. That will at least make it safer. But I don't think that there are any county dollars going into this. I think it's TDD that's actually building that. Several years ago, when they were talking about a flyover or a couple of flyovers at the 63 intersection so you could get away from all the stop signs, that was a $115 million project. So No, the county couldn't handle that. No, the state can't handle that. And truthfully, this ought to be a time for reflection. We're not in good shape at the state level for highway funding or at the federal level for highway funding. I think it's a cause to be thankful that 25 years ago, somebody came up with a pretty good plan, and it's still working for us. And I think self-sufficiency is something that Boone Countyans expect, and I think we'll help deliver it with this. It's gonna take some innovation and imagination in the future, and some tough votes.
And some sacrifice, but, you know, when the business loop Conley Road Extension took out some of your favorite golf holes, right? David?
Fred, you know this, some people do, some people don't. I've been on this committee too many years, too many times. But this is truly an investment for the future of Boone County. When I was on that county commission, Road and Bridge was funded by property tax. It was just pinch every penny you could pinch to make it work. We got this passed, not while I was there, but I helped do that. It has made a tremendous difference in the county's ability to give quality roads, to get citizens into the community, get people out of the community when they need to, provide alternate routes. When there's a crash on I-70, you have Gillespie Bridge Road that's paved, which used to be gravel. I mean, there's countless arteries like that that people use every day that have been vastly improved because of this tax. This is an absolute no-brainer. It should pass.
Tom?
I want to reiterate that 30 years ago, concrete was $33 a yard, now it's over 100.
Yeah.
So we have to take care of business and move forward.
And it doesn't last very long anymore.
No.
So it's really, Eric?
If there's a crack, it's like the mortar between two bricks. If it's not filled up,
Yeah.
it's a void.
Yeah.
And we have voids in a lot of our roads, but I'm not sure it's county roads because you've got city roads, state roads, county roads, and they all have letters.
Thank you for bringing that up. The professionalism that is in the Road and Bridge Department is addressing that right now. They have looked at preservation techniques from all over the nation and are using some of those on Boone County
And
roads.
before you chip seal, you should fill those cracks.
Right.
Otherwise, water sits in there and then it freezes and
Same
bakes. And you'll see a chip seal with a big piece missing. It's because that crack wasn't filled.
Yeah. Rusty, you want to say
I
something?
was just curious, in your pro forma, your 14 million, how are you projecting sales to look in the next 10 years?
Very flat.
Very flat? I think you're being very optimistic on flat.
Well, you know, I think there's going to be an opportunity down the road for a use tax in this community, and I think that's going to make a big difference. You know, Columbia is a very computer-savvy town, and unfortunately, that means that a lot of our citizens like to do their shopping online, and so I'm hoping that the use tax, when we get a chance to consider it, folks are going to allow us to level the playing field for local brick and mortar retailers. And I think Amazon's on board to do that.
I mean, I think it's more leveling the playing field for the municipalities. I mean, the retailers,
Sure.
they're doing both. They'll figure out the online side. I mean, it's the municipalities that aren't getting the record of sales online that are suffering.
But when they figure it out, we benefit. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for all the
Thank you.
questions, gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Madam Chair, thank you very much.
We're going to take just 1 minute if people need to move around a little bit, get everybody settled. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming. Governor Wilson, thank you, Fred. Harry, thank you for your leadership in regards to Proposition 1. The second half of the meeting, as we mentioned before, we're going to have a candidate forum today where we're going to highlight Sarah Walsh and Michaela Skelton, potentially running, or I shouldn't say potentially, you guys are running for 50th District Representative seat. Let me share with you a little bit about the format we're going to use. The candidates are going to introduce themselves for 2 minutes, and then each candidate will then respond to a series of questions. I think we've got 10 questions that I will pose to them, and you'll be allowed 2 minutes to respond to each question. We do have a timer here that'll share with you where you're at with regard to that 2 minutes. And following the chamber questions, we'll allow, depending upon where we are time-wise, we may allow some closing remarks, which will end up being about 2 minutes on your behalf. So if you guys are ready to go, we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. First question. If elected to office, what will be the first piece of legislation or policy position?
Introduction.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm way ahead. Thank you for reminding me. Let's do introduction, okay? Michaela, why don't you start? You'll have 2 minutes for your introduction.
Thank you. So my name is Michaela Skelton, and I am the Democratic candidate for Missouri's 50th House District. Our special election is August the 8th, so we're just a little bit less than 4 weeks away from the election. I like to tell a little story to kind of introduce myself and answer that question that everybody always wants to know, why are you running? I grew up in a small rural town in Alabama, just outside of Montgomery, in a military family. My father served 20 years in the Air Force. My mom served 3. So service to my community and service to my country has always been a part of who I am since I was a child. And the community that I grew up in was more than a neighborhood, more than a community, it was family, which is so important when you're in a military family because you're away from your relatives and grandparents. And so when we moved to Boone County, we moved here with my husband and to raise our children because we found that same kind of close-knit community that is always there for you, that I grew up with. Because when I was a kid, growing up, my parents knew that when my brothers and I went out to go ride bicycles, that the greatest danger we faced were a couple of mean dogs in the back of the neighborhood because every other adult in that neighborhood was watching out for us. And that's the kind of community that we have here in Boone County as well. And that's what I want to see our state legislature be, as part of our community that actually helps to look out for us and fill gaps when there's a need. And when I graduated from law school and I took a job with the Missouri State Senate, I thought that that's what I was going to be doing, helping real people solve real problems by working with both Democratic and Republican senators to write good bills that worked well. And it turned out that I only really ever got one assignment like that because most of the things that actually came across my desk and the ones that actually moved were bills that were hand-delivered to me by corporate lobbyists. And those were the bills that moved, and those were the ones that it was clear that the people that owned those bills were not the senators or the representatives whose names were on the bills. It was the lobbyists, and they were picking winners and losers in our economy instead of making sure it was fair for everyone. And I want to make sure it's fair for everyone.
Michaela, thank you. Sarah, you'll have 2 minutes.
I'm Sarah Walsh, and I'm running as the Republican candidate in the special election August 8th. I grew up right here in mid-Missouri. My parents moved from California State back in 1986 to, honestly, just to have less crime and to just grow up in the heartland of America. My mom always wanted to grow up in a country. My dad installed carpet and floor covering for a living, and so they packed up a van and moved us out. So my parents struggled paycheck to paycheck throughout my childhood. So as I lived my childhood, we moved from home to home and rented until they finally were able to afford to buy. Growing up in mid-Missouri, it's amazing how, again, although my parents were not able to afford to support my education, they encouraged me with that hard work ethic that I saw at a young age. And as I became an adult and went into the workforce, I started, I'm paying for things myself. I've been a customer of Central Bank for 20 years. And I love that heartland feeling and when you go into their bank. Shelter Insurance has covered me for 20 years as well. And what I've seen in the businesses is there is that love and that care for the community. So many sponsorships in the community do our businesses do, and that means so much to me. So as a state representative, I want to work hard for businesses, and I want to work hard to ensure that the opportunities that are there will still exist. I work full-time through my college and undergraduate, both my undergraduate and master's degree. I earned my master's degree at the University of Missouri here in Columbia. And I know what it's like to, again, that hard work ethic I want to put forth to you and serve you best in the Missouri legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now for the first question. And Michaela, we'll let you start with this. If If elected to office, what will be your first piece of legislation or policy position you will sponsor or support?
So the first piece that I would like to support, because I think that like we were talking about, sales tax being flat in our local community. And a lot of that has to do with the purchasing power of our workers. And so making sure that we have fair wage laws for our workers here in Columbia and across the state, which allows people to actually buy the high quality products that our local businesses are offering. So many of the larger employers, I mean the largest employer in the state of Missouri is Walmart. And they offer often low wages without real benefits, and so it really puts a strain on our local communities and our local businesses, because it makes it difficult for people to be able to buy the high quality goods that our local businesses support and sell. It also makes it hard for our restaurant and our restaurant industry to be able to function well, because we don't have as many families that can actually afford to take their families out to eat at dinner time. And so I would like to see our community stand together for our workers, because there's really no such thing as a pro-business economy or a pro-worker economy. It's either a good economy that supports good workers and good businesses, or a bad economy that supports taking advantage and exploiting our workers and bad actors in business that really take advantage of even our small business owners. And so that's what I would like to see happen in our state legislature.
Okay, thank you very much. Sarah, same question. What will be your first piece of legislation or policy position you will sponsor or support?
Well, the first piece of legislation or policy position that I will support will be jobs and economic development. I will not be a candidate, I am not a candidate who will demonize any businesses. As growing up, again, like I said, poor in rural Missouri, I shopped at Walmart in Eldon, Missouri. In fact, one of the things I've shared at other events and such is that I actually wore Pittsburgh Steelers clothing into the Walmart in Eldon, Missouri. Prices there were affordable, so any time that we could get lower prices, we were able to buy more things and so provide for the family rather than buying them at garage sales or hand-me-downs, again, wearing Pittsburgh Steelers clothing from my relatives in Pennsylvania, care packages that were sent. So I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to wear, again, hand-me-downs and things like that. But I also know that our businesses, I will be an advocate for our businesses, because those businesses create jobs, whether it's Walmart or whether it's Central Bank or whether it's any of the businesses. So I will work to ensure that the legislation, I want to be a collaborator. I want to work with businesses in the chamber and the community and citizens and economic development boards to come together with good policies and good decisions to be able to, again, create jobs in the community and help lift people out of struggling from paycheck to paycheck, so that they can lift and rise above that, like my family did and like I was able to do.
Thank you very much. Sarah, we're going to start the second question with you. What measures would you support to fund new construction and maintenance of the existing interstate highways?
Well, that's a really great question, and I loved earlier in the discussion about the renewal of the county tax, because as I've been going door to door throughout the district, one thing that was one of the things I know Representative Sheree Reich mentioned earlier about the sunset and how she was glad to have that accountability and to see that. Well, that's what I'm hearing at the doors. And so far as with the, give me the question again, I'm sorry.
This is, what measures would you support to fund new construction and maintenance of the existing?
With the roads, absolutely.
Roads.
So with the roads, what it is that people are telling me again that with paying for the roads, what they don't want is just taxes. Taxes that I'm going to go down to Jefferson City and make decisions and just raise everyone's taxes. But they want conversations. So I will be the one who is going to, if there is something that I feel that is supported from the evidence that I see in committees, I'm going to bring that back to the district. I'm running as a full-time representative, and so I will advocate for policies that are in line with the district. But I will make sure that at the end of the day, that every citizen has a voice and that every citizen will make the decisions on raising their taxes.
Okay, thank you. And Michaela, do you understand the question? What measures would you support to fund new construction and maintenance of the existing interstate highway system?
Sure. So I think the first place that we need to discuss and look at, and it's been a topic of discussion for many sessions in a row in the state legislature, is raising the gas tax. We have the second lowest gas tax of all of the states that border the state of Missouri, and we are only outstripped by, I believe it's Arkansas, by 0.2 cents. And yet we have the 6th largest state highway system in the country. And so our per mile spending is not where it needs to be, particularly since so much of that benefit of good roads is going to our rural counties, where without that benefit of state funding for our county roads, most of those roads would have gone back to gravel a long time ago. And it would really be a hidden tax on our rural communities, because when you have gravel roads, it causes additional car maintenance. You have to get your tires replaced more frequently. It's a lot rougher on your car. And so that's something that we need to be looking at. But unfortunately, in our state legislature these last several years, despite the fact that MoDOT has alerted them repeatedly to dwindling funds, and we came really close the last 2 years of not even being able to draw down our federal match dollars because of lack of state highway funding, because of a couple of big lobbies that don't want to see the gas tax increase because it would affect them, and so they push off that burden on our local communities, where we have to put so much more money forward as the local Boone County Road and Bridge tax to even just barely maintain our roads, instead of being able to use those extra dollars to actually do good projects that can help our business, help our country, our communities grow, and help our businesses be successful. And so we really need to be holding our legislature accountable, because they haven't been. They've been doing the bidding of big lobby groups that are really putting us at a disadvantage here in Boone County and here in central Missouri.
Okay. I'm going to move to the third question. It's going to deal with job training, and I'm going to let you start this one. Job training is an important part of economic development, as is job retention and creation. How would you support local communities in meeting their regional needs?
So there are a couple of different avenues, I think, that again we could be looking at how do we get to our job training needs. We have a couple of projects here in Columbia that are really a great opportunity for job training. It's the expansion of the nuclear reactor project. That would be a boon to Columbia, because they're producing some of the rarest cancer-treating radioactive isotopes, and that's something that the whole country could use, that could come right here out of our community in Columbia. But unfortunately, again, we don't have the money to do it, because we just had to hold back $250 million out of our state budget because we don't have enough money, and because there hasn't been that conversation about how do we grow revenue for the state. I mean, we already had to cut prescription drug benefits from 63,000 seniors across the state. We had to cut home health care benefits. And so it's hard to talk about how do we put in these new programs when we can barely afford the ones that we already have in place. You know, it would be great to see fully funding our foundation formula for K-12 schools, and making sure that our high schools are getting every single student both job and career and college ready. You know, expanding those technical training programs that used to be so popular in our high schools. Welding classes, wood shop, so that we can train our students to be carpenters and operating engineers and mechanics and welders, and all of those things, those trade jobs that are still some of the best paying jobs that we have available to folks, and yet we're not preparing our high school students to be able to handle those jobs when they graduate. Because college is great and college is wonderful for a lot of people, and everyone that wants to go should have an opportunity. But college is not necessarily for everyone, and so we should have opportunities available for all of our children to succeed in any way that fits for them. And so that's what I would like to see our community moving forward doing.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. The same question. Job training is an important part of economic development, as is job retention and creation. How would you support local communities in meeting their regional needs?
And job training, that's such an important question. What I would do, again, is be very, very present in the community and work through efforts with the chambers, economic development boards, ready boards, to ensure that there's collaboration. Because when you do that, then you're able to ensure that we're going to work with colleges and all those different partners partnering together to ensure that people are ready for the workforce. I've been attending the Montauk Regional Economic Development Committee meetings, and it's very interesting because they have people that will sit in from various stakeholders, various agencies and such, and everything from Central Missouri Community Action members that we're sitting in on those meetings, to business owners, to bank owners. And so when you have all those, bank owners who can give loans to someone who's going to be trained to maybe, instead of going into the workforce, start their own business. And so being able to bring together all the different stakeholders to be able to give and to have those partnerships, those collaborations. We're going to need to do that because at the end of the day, people have to make tough decisions at home. Like I mentioned, in my childhood, when you're struggling to make ends meet, every single dollar counts, and every single additional tax is tougher on the family. So when you're able to ensure that you can do collaborations and work together in the community without increasing taxes, that is what my goal is going to be, and that is going to be my plan to ensure that, again, you have those efficiencies with everyone working together.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on now to some questions about the University of Missouri. And Sarah, I'm going to let you lead this one. The University of Missouri is the state's flagship educational institution. How would you work with your colleagues and the administration to protect core funding and the strategic initiatives of the university?
Well, I'm a proud graduate of the University of Missouri. I have a master's in public affairs from the University of Missouri. I also worked on campus for the University of Missouri, and so I know what it's like to, at the time that I worked there had been some different cutbacks and things. And so I know that it's very difficult. And so we are in a tough funding situation, as was mentioned before. But what I want to do is work with members in the legislature here to ensure that we can fight for the things, at the end of the day, the University of Missouri is an economic engine, and it is creating so many jobs. As I go door to door in the district, so many people that live here in the district work for the University of Missouri. And the University of Missouri has impacts that affect our whole state. The research that they're doing with the research reactor to be able to maybe someday cure cancer. So I will work with members in the legislature to get funding for the University of Missouri and to work on smart collaboration in ways that that may not that may accomplish the same task, but at the same time also may not cost more. It's just working smart.
Okay, thank you. Michaela, how would you work with your colleagues and the administration to protect core funding for the university?
So I kind of reject the premise of my discussions of increasing revenue being about new taxes. It wouldn't be about new taxes. It would be about reinstating taxes that were not a burden on our businesses prior to the economic meltdown of 2008. We had big multinational and multi-state businesses that were paying their fair share of taxes to be part of our community. And now we have the University of Missouri had to take a 9% cut and lay off hundreds of workers this year, particularly because the most recent round of tax cuts was significantly and wildly more expensive than our state legislature led us to believe that it was going to cost. And instead of talking about undoing that tax, we're going to let 4 more years of a slow phase-in come into place, which you can't tax cut your way to prosperity. We can just look right next door at Kansas, who bankrupted themselves with continuing tax cuts that didn't lead to greater job growth or greater business benefit. Instead, it just led to more money going into the pockets of multinational corporations that was stashed overseas in Cayman Island bank accounts, instead of being reinvested in our communities like we're told is going to happen. And so we need to really be looking seriously at reinstating those taxes that used to be in place so that we can continue to support our university system. I mean, the top 6 goals of the chamber here request more than $500 million in investment in the state of in Mizzou for just here on our flagship campus. It doesn't talk about how we need to be investing in our K-12 institutions. You know, the 3 largest public school districts that are in the 50th district, the state skipped out on a bill for $10.7 million for transportation funding. And again, withholding $250 million in state funding, there's no way that we can fund all of these great projects if we don't talk about raising revenue. There is no pork and fat in the budget left to be cut. I mean, that's why you see such essential programs like prescription drug benefits for seniors. That's critical to their survival being cut. If that's pork, it's a sad state of affairs.
Thank you. We're going to continue a question in that same vein. Both of you have probably heard that the University of Missouri system is considering what is called a translation precision medical complex that would help advance MU research and educational efforts. The price tag that was announced a few years ago on this initiative was $120 million. How would you support, or would you support, that effort, and how would you work with the university and the community to make this a reality?
Starting with me again?
Yeah, I'm going to start.
Okay. So again, these are all really great projects that would lead to great things in our local community here, expanding the efforts of the university, expanding medical care access here in Boone County, and collaborations between the university and the medical community are all wonderful things. But you can't squeeze blood from a turnip. And it's one of those things that how do we make these choices without, again, looking at how do we increase revenues for the state? And we've been promised again and again that these big corporate tax cuts are going to lead to increased revenues, and every year they don't, we fall short. And I want to see all of these great projects put into place because they would be such a benefit to our children, to our community, and to our business owners. As you bring in these good paying jobs for these big projects, particularly medical jobs and research-related jobs, those are people that have money to spend in our community because those are the best kinds of jobs. Those are the jobs of today and the jobs of the future that you're going to actually see growth in. And those are the kinds of industries that we need to be attracting here to Boone County and to Columbia because that's how we grow and we get better. But we can't do that without baseline levels of funding. And we are in a really bad place in the state legislature, and because we have been catering to big business interests that aren't even looking out for our small businesses, our local communities, and our local businesses. Because a lot of our local businesses, other than helping to fund a lobbyist that comes from the Chamber of Commerce, can't afford to send their very own lobbyist down to Jefferson City to make sure that their interests are getting represented. And I know for sure that the workers and the people of this district aren't able to afford to send a lobbyist down to Jefferson City to make sure that they're heard and listened to.
Thank you. Sarah, the question is, the University of Missouri was considering a precision medical complex a few years ago that would advance research and educational efforts. The price tag a few years ago was $120 million. How would you support this effort and work with the university and the community to make this a reality?
Well, the University of Missouri, my understanding of what that project is, and I won't admit or won't say that I know the ins and outs deeply about it, but my understanding of what I saw in the paper is that of all things, the University of Missouri right now, what is working so well and what is so successful with our University of Missouri is the healthcare. They're bringing in researchers, they are hiring faculty, it is growing, it is doing really well. And so, and the little that I understand about what this TPN does is that essentially it could reduce healthcare costs. So instead of raising more taxes ultimately in the long run to pay for things, if healthcare costs less, then that's going to be a ripple effect throughout society because they're able to, this research is helping to target and find out, for instance, people who, to apply the treatment based on what susceptibility the person may have to a certain disease. And so if they're able to find that out, then they're able to apply the treatment or prevention techniques to then address that exactly disease instead of just applying medicine and treatment to just everybody. So, so that's going to help them be able to really zone in, and overall, that's going to really affect Missouri and the world. So I will work, again, with my colleagues in the legislature to work towards funding and to collaborational methods that we can use. Again, to collaborate and eliminate, streamline things. The neat thing about them having everybody, too, in this one building is that, my undergraduate's in business and marketing, and it's removing information silos. And so if you've got researchers from various ways and the vet school and med school and everybody in the same building, they're able to collaborate and come to solutions.
Thank you. We're going to let you take the next question to lead off. This question has to do with school funding for elementary and secondary education. Just this year, the governor has withheld an amount of money provided in the budget for school transportation. Columbia Public Schools, in an effort to find ways to be more efficient and save taxpayer money, has suggested the creation of a pilot program. This program would encourage school district to explore partnerships with local communities to utilize their public transportation to create cost savings and increase ridership for the city. Do you support this effort, and would you be willing to co-sponsor this legislation?
Absolutely. Anything that's going to reduce inefficiencies and that's going to create more efficiencies and that's going to be collaborations and that's going to be less cost to the taxpayer and to our citizens at the end of the day, I will absolutely support. It is so important for us to be looking, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, that we're to be looking for collaborations and those partnerships where we can save money and do good things and still continue the work, but again, being a good steward of people's tax dollars. I worked for the state auditor's office as one of my jobs, and again, rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse, and finding where money is spent, and being a good steward of people's tax dollars. I'm passionate about that. And so whether it's a business that's paying taxes, or whether it's a homeowner paying taxes, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that every citizen's taxes are being used wisely.
Thank you. The question is, this year the governor withheld an amount of money that was provided in the budget for school transportation. Columbia Public Schools, in an effort to find ways to fund that, are exploring a partnership with local communities to utilize their public transit to create cost savings and to increase ridership in the city. Do you support this effort, and would you be willing to co-sponsor legislation?
Yes, and absolutely. So working on these intergovernmental partnerships are a really great idea. And being able to use city buses that might not otherwise be in use to transport our high school students to and from school is a really great idea. But that works well right here in Columbia, but that doesn't work well in Ashland, and that doesn't work well in Prairie Home or Jamestown or California, where they don't have good public transit systems like we have here in Columbia. And so while that's a good patch for Columbia Public Schools, it's not a workable solution for the vast majority of school districts across the state. It's really not a workable solution for the vast majority of school districts that are within the 50th House District. And the solution of working with the public transit system here in Columbia really only works for a small portion as well of those public school students that are going to Columbia Public Schools, because the size of the Columbia Public School District is really outsized for what one would imagine a local regional school to be, because it does include so much rural area around the city itself. And so it's a half measure, and it's a great place to start to help relieve the burden from Columbia Public Schools personally and individually, but that's not going to address our public transit and our school transportation funding problems for the rest of the school districts in the 50th House District and across the state.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to let you respond to this next question first. Governor Greitens' appointed committee on simple, fair, and low taxes released their findings to the public on June 30th. Governor Nixon had a task force in 2010 that recommended a number of the changes similar to this recent panel. What recommendations would you enact?
Now, I'm trying to remember correctly what all was included in that, if that included just allowing for taxes for internet sales, or if that also included the complete elimination of corporate income taxes, if that was the whole package. But so leveling the playing field for our retailers, if we're talking about allowing for sales taxes on internet purchased goods, that's absolutely something that we should be doing, because our economy should be fair for all businesses that are operating in the economy. And so if you have big online retailers like Amazon, who put a lot of booksellers out of business, and has put a lot of clothing retailers out of business, and other places, other small businesses, because they're able to offer products at a cheaper price because you're not having to pay the sales tax on it. That's an unfair advantage for those internet sales companies, and so we should absolutely be leveling the playing field. Now, if we're going to be talking about that whole package of tax programs that he put out in that big memo, I would absolutely disagree with the complete elimination of corporate income taxes. Again, all you have to do is look right next door at Kansas, and they were losing teachers without any kind of funding to be able to bring them back in. Their school districts were suffering because they weren't able to pay their teachers sufficiently. Their roads were crumbling. The only roads that were even maintained at all were toll roads. You have a significant degradation of their infrastructure system. Jobs leaving instead of jobs coming into the state, because they don't have a workforce that can actually afford to buy anything. And we're not having that investment in our local communities. And so I would absolutely disagree with that. We shouldn't be placing the entire burden of funding those basic needs of our state government and the basic needs of our communities only on the workers. Businesses get a benefit out of having good roads and having good schools, because that's where you get products to and from your business, and you get good workers. And so all of our businesses should be helping to support those needs as well.
Thank you. Sarah, the question is, Governor Greitens appointed committee on simple, fair, and low taxes released their findings to the public just a few days ago. Governor Nixon had a task force in 2010 that recommended a number of changes similar to what was announced by the recent panel. What recommendations would you work to enact?
Well, tax credits, I mean, this is a subject where there are some tax credits that are not performing. There are other ones that are doing well. Again, like I mentioned before, being a watchdog of your tax dollars, ensuring that we're being a good steward of your tax dollars, ensuring that we're being efficient and making wise decisions and realizing that you work hard to earn those dollars and that at the end of the day, it's your money. So I will, I will look at, the details of that and discuss with my colleagues because there may be, because tax credits are a good tool, but some of them, again, if they're not efficient, if they're not effective, well, then we need to take a look at that. But the ones that are working and the ones that are doing good and that are creating jobs and that are helping make a good investment in our future and in our communities, well, we need to keep those. And so, again, it's all about, just like you make decisions sitting down at your table with your family as to what's the best decision for your family, and the government needs to do the same. And so I will work hard to, again, be a good steward and to work with my colleagues to make wise decisions.
Sarah, thank you. We're going to continue with you, and we're going to continue on the topic of tax cuts. The implementation of tax cuts enacted by the General Assembly in 2014 will begin to be phased in during 2018 tax year. What positive or negative effects will these changes have for families and small businesses in your district?
As we mentioned before, anytime people are able to keep more of their money, they're able to invest that in their communities. And so, I mean, back when I was a child, I touched on this earlier, if the price of something goes up because the tax went up on a business and it filters down into the price of the product, again, then families are then having to buy more things at garage sales. They're not able to buy things new. I mean, you make these real decisions as a family when you live paycheck to paycheck. And so it's your money. And so at the end of the day, I will work to ensure that you can keep your money because I believe that you know how best to spend it. Whether it's inviting a neighbor over to Christmas dinner who has no family nearby and you've got a little more money to be able to pay for that. Or maybe you're able to get a little more money so as a business you're able to hire another employee or give them a little Christmas bonus like a ham or something like that. It all makes a difference, and ensuring that you're able to, those are directly spent in the community. And so I will fight for you in the legislature to be able to have those, and I would support that.
Okay, thank you. Michaela, the question is, the implementation of tax cuts that were enacted by the General Assembly in 2014 will begin to be phased in 2018 tax year. What positive or negative effects will these changes have for families and small businesses in your district?
So I think that this tax cut that's going to be phased in is largely actually going to be very harmful to our local communities and to our local businesses. Because when you look at this new tax cut that's going to be phased in, families making less than $60,000 a year are only going to get about $57 a tax year still that's going to stay in their pocket instead of being paid into taxes. Whereas families making $1 million a year or more are going to get an $8,000 tax cut. And I don't know about you, but I would be more than willing to pay an extra $1 a day to make sure that my kids can go to a good school, that I can drive on decent roads. Because again, those are things that we have to pool our resources together to make sure that we can do and make sure that we have those available for all of us to use. And those that have the most, it's from each according to ability and to each according to need. And so again, our rural communities end up having more need. And our wealthiest families in the state, again, those making $1 million a year or more, I can't imagine there's more than, at most, maybe 1 or 2 folks here in this room today that would be getting that $8,000 a year tax cut. And so those are families that might be an extra vacation, but what is that taking out of our local school districts? What is that taking away from our community and from our children, from our ability to function as a society? We have, again, the $10.7 million in school transportation funding that the state has skipped out on paying their bill, that is stuck with our local communities instead. what else could our communities be doing for our school children if they weren't having to pick up that tab for transportation funding? And it's only going to get worse. You know, you're going to end up seeing the state's only paying about 18% of transportation costs instead of the 75% that they're required. We're getting ready to get to, they withheld some this year, and they're going to withhold more next year, where they're not going to pay the transportation costs at all, which again is disproportionately hurtful to our rural communities.
Okay. Michaela, we're going to move on and we're going to talk about economic development. And this question is, how do you see the role of government in incenting small business attraction and expansion for your district?
So I think that there is, so one of the things that we've been working on here in Columbia and in Southern Boone County is expansion of the airport. And so that's something that actually incentivizes additional small businesses to locate here without having to directly subsidize their coming by having those good transportation options available. And that's a good example of a public-private partnership that really works well. We've had private investment in the expansion of the airport. And we've also had a very specific and directed tax. It's the lodging tax that actually is bringing in that revenue based on people that are coming in through the airport to actually visit here in Columbia. And so it's very, very targeted, and it doesn't put an additional burden on our local communities. But so we have to take a careful balancing approach with how we incentivize businesses to come that doesn't end up hurting our businesses that are already here. Because if you provide overwhelming incentive for new businesses to come, our long-standing and existing businesses, they don't have that opportunity, they don't have that option. And so they end up with higher prices or higher overhead. They end up with less profits in their buildings and in their businesses because they don't have access to those same kinds of incentives. And so you have to kind of be careful about how you do those and how you structure them, especially when you have well-established, so if you're talking about small mom and pops and maybe doing subsidized loans for those folks to be able to get started, that would be a great option and a great way to grow a small business. But if you're talking about really successful businesses that have franchises in other states or elsewhere in our state, clearly they have a successful business model that if there is a demand and a need here in our local community, they should also be able to be successful without taxpayer dollars subsidizing their business bottom line.
Sarah, the question is, what would you see the role of government in incenting small business attraction and expansion for your district?
Well, as I go door to door and talk to businesses in the district, what they're telling me is, again, the overburdening regulations and the mountains of paperwork that they have to deal with. So incentive, I mean, less government. We want people to be able to, I want people to be able to work hard at their businesses and not spend time filling out papers as much as possible. I mean, obviously we all want, there's basic things and basic regulations that are good, but I will push back against things that don't make sense in the district. And upon being elected, I'm going to put together a collaboration of working with chambers of commerce, working with business owners to sit down, and we're going to sit down at a table and we're going to look at what is the most difficult thing, the challenge that government is in your way. How is government in your way, and how can we get it out of your way so that you can hire more people, so that you can grow, so you can expand. And so, and again, common sense solutions, some is good, but when businesses are saying that they're spending so much time on paperwork and they just feel like it'd be easier to just go out of business than it would to just continue with all this burden, there's something wrong. And so I'm going to, again, like I said, sit down with businesses, we're going to come up with solutions, and we're going to make it happen together because this is your government. And so that's what we're going to do, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's been very interesting and exciting, and we're going to come up with all sorts of solutions because the people in our district they've got wonderful ideas, and so we just need to listen to them, and we need to sit down and come up with some solutions. So I will work hard for that.
Thank you. And as a follow-up question, and we'll let you respond to this first, the Missouri Technology Corporation and the Missouri Innovation Center has seen massive cuts in funding. Both entities are responsible for providing infrastructure and resources for early-stage, high-growth companies that are developing breakthrough technologies. What steps would you take to build a coalition to ensure Missouri reinvests money back into these efforts?
Well, the same thing as I was saying before. It's just collaboration. It's getting together at the table and finding out what we can do and working with our my colleagues in the legislature to be able to come up with solutions together. We're not gonna come up with, these are not gonna be easy solutions, but we can do it together. And I've worked, these types of decisions, I've worked in all three sectors, public, private, and nonprofit. My background that I bring to the table is that I've worked for a factory. I experienced a factory layoff working for Maytag in Jefferson City. And I've worked for nonprofit organizations, and I've worked for businesses. And so working for the state, as for the auditor's office, and as a legislator assistant, all these different 20 years of work experience that I bring to the table, working with people of all variety of backgrounds and from all sorts of industries. And so I will work together for us to come up with solutions, come to the table to be able to make good sense and good policy in Jefferson City.
Thank you. Michaela, the question is, the Missouri Technology Corporation and the Missouri Innovation Center have seen massive cuts in their funding. Both entities are responsible for providing infrastructure and resources for early-stage, high-growth companies that are developing breakthrough technologies. What steps would you take to build a coalition to ensure Missouri reinvests its money into these efforts?
Absolutely. So I think, and it kind of goes back to what I've talked about with each of these answers, and really it's acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is campaign finance reform. Because we end up with so much that doesn't get done in our state legislature that despite the best intentions of a lot of people that are down in Jeff City, you end up with people who are beholden to their campaign donors. Big campaign donors, you have a lot of money coming through Jeff City. I mean, working there as a staff attorney for the Missouri Senate. Sarah was talking about reducing regulation. Well, our state legislature has actually been guilty of targeting specific businesses or over regulations specifically to keep them out of the state. When I was working in the state Senate research office, I had a bill that came across my desk that even had the name of the company that was being targeted, and we'll call it Loser Company. And it went up to the floor of the Senate, and the sponsor of that bill wouldn't even acknowledge that he was picking a business that was going to lose in the state of Missouri, that wasn't going to have a chance to be successful. Because when asked by another senator, wait a minute, is this bill about Loser Company? He looked them directly in the face and said, no, of course not. And I knew as a staff person, it took everything I had in me sitting at that table to not stand up and then say liar. Because they knew what they were doing, that they were picking a business to not be able to have that chance to be successful here in Missouri. And so when you have lobbying organizations that are pushing the direction of legislation down in Jeff City, you end up where you have entrenched monopolies, where you have inability for new businesses, new startups to be able to be successful. And so that's why you find cuts to funding like the technology sector, where those businesses, if their funding is available, could be competitors to longstanding businesses that have lobbyists available to them. And so I would like to push back on that to make sure that every business has equal opportunity to be successful here in Missouri.
Candidates, thank you for your answers. We're now going to move to closing statements, and each of you will be given 2 minutes to have your closing statement. And Michaela, I'm going to start with you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming here today. Again, my name is Michaela Skelton, and I'm the Democratic candidate for Missouri's 50th House District. I want to be a member of our legislature because I want to see our legislature be an active part of our community that's making sure that our economy is fair for all businesses and for our workers, that makes sure that we have the basic needs that we have to be a well-functioning society and community, and making sure that we're there to step in and fill the gaps when there's a need, when there are emergencies, and make sure that we are functioning well and not being bought by big moneyed interests that are not out to protect or to help our local communities and our local citizens and our workers, our families and our children. I want to see Boone County continue to thrive and flourish. I want to see the whole of the 50th district continue to have that small town feel in all of our rural communities that's so important, that I grew up loving. Because those communities are wonderful and beautiful, and they have just as much right to be successful in this state as larger communities in St. Louis, Kansas City, here in Columbia, that have that greater concentration of wealth and of business. And so I want to see everyone have a fair shake at really being able to succeed here in Missouri. And we need to make sure that our state legislature is held accountable, and really start working and pushing back on the majority that has tried to to tax cut us to prosperity, and it hasn't come. It has not been delivered to us, and so many of our communities are suffering for want of basic services and for want of competition and ability for businesses to actually survive and thrive. We have Prairie Home, just a little town of 250 people over in Cooper County, used to have 2 grocery stores. And we had Walmart moved into Boonville, and it killed both of their local businesses. And now they're beside themselves with glee that they have a Dollar General that doesn't even sell fresh produce. And that's not fair competition in our economy. That's not fair market share. And that's not something that makes things work well for our whole community.
Thank you very much. Senator, you'll have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
I'm Sarah Walsh, and I'm the Republican candidate running to serve as your state representative in Missouri's 50th district. I grew up here in Mid-Missouri. I've graduated from the University of Missouri. I got my bachelor's in business with Columbia College. I worked full-time to earn my undergraduate degree and to earn my master's degree. I know what it's like to work hard. I will work hard for you in Jefferson City. I've been working for the past 20 years of my life. I've worked in all 3 sectors, public, private, and nonprofit. I lost my job in a factory layoff. I know what that's like. I want to work to keep jobs and to bring jobs here to Missouri. As I go door to door throughout the district, so many people in the district, they tell me they're looking for jobs, they're looking for employment. I'm keeping a list, and when I get elected, and in the meantime, I'm trying to help them find jobs. When I get elected, I will help connect them with businesses in the district that have jobs and job opportunities. My 3 priorities are jobs, education, and public safety. Jobs, I will work with small businesses as you work and are job creators in our community, and as you do so much for our communities. I thank you for sponsoring Little League tournaments and for all that you do in the communities. What would we be if not for our businesses? I will work hard for you for low taxes and for common sense things and for things that won't hurt you, and I thank you for what you do in the community. On education, I will invest in our schools. Far and wide throughout the district, people love our schools, and I will work hard to invest in them and ensure that every child has the opportunity to have a world-class education and to live the American dream. Public safety. I am so thrilled with the hard work that our law enforcement officers are doing throughout the district, and I have the highest respect for them, and I will fight for them in Jefferson City. I'm honored to have been endorsed by the Corrections Officers Association, by the Missouri Cattlemen's Association, and by the Columbia Police Officers Association. I thank you very much. My name is Sarah Walsh, and I'm running to serve, and I would appreciate your vote August 8th. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This concludes our candidate forum today. Please remember to vote on August 8th, and please give consideration to the answers that you heard today. This concludes our forum, and thank you all for coming.